Wow, it's amazing to be here in person after almost 2 years. Welcome. My name is Tanmayee. I'm a product manager working on Codespaces here at GitHub. And today we're going to learn how Codespaces empowers developers, data scientists like you and me be super productive as we get started on or as we work on our data science and machine learning projects. So with that, imagine it's your best friend's birthday, all right? Now what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a birthday? A cake, right? So you're going to have to get this cake for your friend, and let's talk about some of the ways you can go about it. Your first option is to bake the cake from scratch. In this scenario, you would first pick up your phone, look for some cake recipes, zero in on one. Then you would head to the kitchen to see if you have all of the ingredients. Then I'm going to bet that you're not going to have all the ingredients, so you're going to head to the grocery store, buy all of the required ingredients, come back home, maybe take a nap after all that shopping. Then you would spend the next few hours mixing all of the ingredients, baking the cake in your oven, and then figure out how you want to decorate it. Let's just say end-to-end, all of this might end up taking you a day or two before that cake is ready to go. Now, your second option to speed things up a little bit might be to get a premix instead. In this scenario, you don't have to spend time figuring out the recipe or the ingredients per se, but you'd still head to the grocery store, buy that box of Ghirardelli, Betty Crocker, or whichever one you love, and then come back home, bake the cake, and decorate it after. But hey, if you're someone like me who has no time to bake a cake from scratch, but who loves eating cakes regardless, then you might head to your favorite bakery in town and simply place an order for the perfectly decorated, tastiest cake that's going to be baked for you. So in this scenario, all you have to do is pick it up, right? Now, a Codespace is essentially a fully baked cake with all of the ingredients, flavors, toppings, decorations created for you just the way you want without you having to bake that cake yourself. So with that, you can think of Codespaces as one-click, fully configured dev environments that are tailored to your project's needs. Now, in addition to them being customized for your project, they're also personalized for you. So if you enjoy working with the dark theme, let's say, or specific font sizes, extensions, and whatnot, you can personalize your Codespaces to look and feel the same, no matter which project you're working on. And last but not the least, Codespaces is a cloud-based service that is managed by us GitHub for you, which means you don't need to create a cloud subscription or understand the concepts of the cloud, right? We take care of all of that for you. And as long as you have a browser and an internet connection at hand, you're good to go. You can access these environments from anywhere. All right, so now that we know what Codespaces are at a high level, let me tell you about the time when I started my first job ever. That's actually a picture of my first badge. I started out as a data analyst at Cummins. Cummins is a company that builds engines for context. And interestingly enough, the first thing that I was going to work on was a data science project. Now, if I remember correctly, our team was tasked with creating an inventory of all the spare parts that go into making an engine, and then optimize their usage to reduce some space in our warehouses. Now, as someone who is new to the field, new to the job, the very first question that came to my mind was, how do I get started, right? I'm sure you all have asked that yourselves as well. So how do I look at the various data science projects? How do I acclimate myself before jumping into this real-world project? Now, like most of us would do, I pretty much went to the internet, started looking up everything data science, right? I came across videos, white papers, a ton of GitHub projects. So I just selected a project and decided to run it on my machine. I cloned the project, and I attempted to run it. And that's when I was hit with a slew of errors. First up, my Conda environment wasn't set up correctly, turns out. So I had to first understand what that meant, and then figure out good time to get that set up. Next up, Docker started throwing a bunch of errors. Obviously, did not understand Docker very well back then, so I had to spend a huge chunk of my time understanding it, installing Docker Desktop, and then going from there. As I managed to do that, I started hitting into other issues around specific machine learning modules and libraries that were just missing on my laptop. So I had to go back to the internet and find the syntax to get them installed on my machine. In a nutshell, I was really struggling to get to a point where I could run the sample and start learning about data science, which was my initial goal, right? So if I were to summarize how I was feeling back when I got started, I would say it was a very daunting experience. There were too many barriers, and I wanted to give up. That was the feeling. Now with Codespaces, our mission is to really lower these barriers to entry and empower you to explore, learn, get started immediately, out of the box. So we're going to replay the same experience that I went through, but with the power of Codespaces this time. So let me show you my screen here real quick. And we're going to head over to this Intro to Machine Learning project. Now, if you're just getting started, this is, I'm sure, a repo that you might come across, right? Now, it has two notebooks. There's one for scikit-learn, one for matplotlib, and then there's a README. There is no configuration or a requirements.txt file telling me how to set an environment up to run this project. With Codespaces, though, all I have to do is hit on this green code button, and we're going to fire up a Codespace for this project. Now, as that spins up, what we are doing is we are creating a container in the backend using a default image that is hosted and managed by GitHub for you. Then we are deploying that container onto a Linux virtual machine, which is also managed by us. Now, the awesome part about this default or universal image, as we call it, is that it has a set of tools and runtimes. Think of Docker, Python, Node, all of that already set up for you. And in addition to that, we also pre-install a set of commonly used machine learning libraries and toolkits also in that environment, so that you don't have to worry about creating a Conda environment or setting up Docker desktop on your laptop before you can actually start exploring. So here in a few seconds, you saw that my Codespace is ready. It's a fully featured IDE. I love to highlight that. I have access to a terminal. So if I type in Python-v here, you'll see that Python is fully configured for me. Let's hide the terminal here and go to the scikit-learn notebook real quick. And then this is essentially a quick intro to machine learning with scikit-learn notebook, right? So I can scroll down as I come across a line of code here. You'll see that VS Code recommends I install the Python extension. Since we're going to work with Jupyter Notebooks, we're going to need a kernel. Let's actually go ahead and take that recommendation. And then I'm going to head back to the same scikit-learn notebook. And at this point, I have a very rich notebook editing experience right inside this Codespace. And I can simply come here and run this block of code. You'll see that this just works out of the box, primarily because scikit-learn is already pre-installed in this environment. And I can focus on running these cells, really learning about what scikit-learn is, and get started on my learning journey there. Very similar to that, if I head over to, hopefully this runs real quick. OK. If I head over to this matplotlib notebook again, very similar to the scikit-learn, this particular notebook tells me how to get started with matplotlib. And I can also come in here and hit run all. And you'll see in a few seconds that everything just works because matplotlib is also pre-installed in this environment. So all of the common libraries that you use, whether it's NumPy, Pandas, and so on and so forth, are already set up for you. So the power of this experience is that if you are someone who's just getting started, and you come across one of the 1,000+ notebooks that are hosted on GitHub today that don't necessarily tell you how to get started with the project, right? Then you can simply create a Codespace for them. And we'll take care of configuring that environment for you. And you can focus on learning and getting started. All right, now exploration just doesn't stop at trying existing projects, right? You might want to experiment, prototype with your own sandbox environment to sort of continue building on your knowledge there. So to help you with that, we are adding support for what we call quick start templates. Now, the one that we are going to take a look at is this Jupyter Notebook quick start template. But I'm going to hit see all here for a second just to show you the wide range of scenarios that we've added support for. Now, these quick start templates enable you create a fully configured sandbox Codespace without you having to configure anything so that you can start experimenting instantly. So let's go to this pre-created sandbox code space that I created using the Jupyter template. Again, you'll see that we are using the same default image, which means my Conda environment is set up, all of the machine learning libraries are there. In addition to that, let's actually hide this terminal real quick. In addition to that, we also load this notebook up with a set of sample notebooks so that you have some starter code to explore from instead of getting started from scratch. So I'm going to take a look at this population notebook. Here we are essentially using matplotlib to plot a line chart. So I'm going to hit run all to show you what that looks like. So we are plotting the population of Atlantis over the past few years. Let's say I want to continue experimenting with this notebook, right? And instead of plotting the population for Atlantis, let's say I want to plot it for Vancouver. Vancouver is my city, so let's do that. Now I have this vancouver.csv file on my local machine, on my laptop. So I'm going to drag and drop it and put it into this data folder inside of my code space. And at this point, I can head over back to this population notebook. Let's actually go ahead and rename Atlantis to say vancouver.csv. And then we're also going to update the title of our chart. And then I'm going to hit run all again. And within a few seconds, I have a nice line chart that shows me the trends of my city over the past few years there. So really, it's very simple for me to jump into this sandbox playground type of an environment where I can add more notebooks, I can get rid of these, I can update them, and really continue building on my knowledge. Now let's say that you end up loving what you're creating here, and you want to share this with your colleagues or friends, you want to collaborate with more folks. All you have to do is head over to this source control tab here. Let's add a commit message, added a CSV file. Let's go ahead and commit it. And at this point, I can publish this code space to a GitHub project. So I'm going to say publish branch. Let's just call it sandbox environment. And then I'm going to zoom in so that folks can see here. And there are two options. Either I can publish to a private or a public repo. So let's just select private in this case. And within a few seconds, we're going to upload all your files and create a GitHub repository for you. So this is where you can now add more folks, submit PRs, you know the drill, right? And who knows, this might end up becoming a fun project, a passion project that you end up maintaining over time. All right, so now that we've seen all of this, I also want to highlight that in addition to all of these awesome functionalities, we are also partnering with LinkedIn Learning to offer a wide range of courses, right from programming languages to data science, machine learning, Python, that are all seamlessly integrated with Codespaces to further help you enhance that learning and getting started journey. So definitely check these out and let us know what you think. All right, so now that we've covered getting started, exploration, experimentation, let me continue telling you my story, right? Now, I will admit, back in the day, did not have access to Codespaces. So with a lot of pain, I did manage to get started. Now, my next step was to continue working on the actual project, right? What this meant was I had to wipe out my laptop of all of the configurations that I had done during the getting started phase and pretty much reset it up with a configuration that my team shared with me. I vividly remember it was a doc with about 20 odd steps, not fun at all. Setting up a Conda environment, really understanding Docker, specific to my project's needs, cloning the project, installing a bunch of modules. I mean, the list goes on. And not to mention all of the back and forth that I had to do across different teammates who were very kind to help me resolve the errors as I set that environment up. Now, just guess how long it took me to get to a point where I could actually start writing code. 2 weeks. It took me 2 weeks to feel like I was productive at the job that I was hired to do. Fast forward to today, any new engineer at GitHub can spin up a fully configured dev environment and be ready to code, debug on the GitHub repository within 15 seconds. 2 weeks to 15 seconds. That's amazing, right? Now, with Codespaces, we really want to eliminate the pain from you to configure complex projects with very specific configurations that also have a ton of changing dependencies on your local machine and really enable you start coding on day one. In short, we want you to get coding faster. So let's talk about how we can do that, right? First up, with configuration as code using dev container configuration, you can spin up fully configured environments that are standardized for a given project with all the right dependencies, extensions, and scripts set up for you. So again, we are going to replay the same scenario that I went through with the power of Codespaces this time. So let me head over to this simple image classifier project real quick. Now, I already have created a code space for it right here. And before we see the notebook, let's actually take a look at that shared configuration, or the dev container.json. Now, there are a couple of ways to look at this. This is one way that you're seeing on screen. The other way that we've added support for very recently is if you click on this green code button here and click on these 3 ellipses, you can say configure dev container. So here, you get a nice dev container editing experience right inside your repository, where you can make all the changes to your heart's content. And once you're satisfied with it, all you have to do is commit these changes, commit this file back to your repository. And once you do that, every user, every data scientist requesting for a code space off of this repository, the simple image classifier project, will have a very standard, consistent environment, which is based on this very configuration. Now, you can go very simple or very complex with this config. It's really up to you. In this case, you see it's fairly simple, right? I'm still using the default image, which is why you don't see an image attribute here. But hey, if you have a custom image or a Docker file or a Docker Compose YAML that you want to bring us, you can specify it in this configuration, and then we'll use that to create your code space versus the default image. Then I include some extensions. Of course, we need Python, Jupyter, since we are working with Jupyter notebooks. And then I also have Copilot, which is my favorite AI pair programmer, and we'll see how Copilot helps me not have to worry about syntax and really focus on the business logic as I write code on a day-to-day basis. And then in addition to that, I also want to highlight dev container features real quick. So you can think of features as automatic installations of shareable code that you'd otherwise have to maintain lengthy scripts for on your side. Now, the great part is we have created this amazing marketplace here of features that are powered by us. So if you see, it says by dev containers, which means we host and manage these. But then there are some that you'll see the community contributing as well. Now, let's say you're working with a TensorFlow project, right? And you need CUDA installed and set up in your environment. All you have to do is come to this marketplace, look for the CUDA feature. You'd click on that, scroll down, copy this line of code, and then you would paste it into this features section. You can add one or more features depending on your scenario. And then once you check that back in, we'll make sure CUDA is completely set up for you when you create a code space off of this repo. Awesome. So now that we've seen dev containers, I'm going to go back here. I also want to quickly highlight that this project also has a requirements.txt file. So in addition to looking at the dev container configuration when we create your code space, we also make sure that we auto-install any requirements.txt file that lives in your project. So there are additional modules that you want to specify in here. You can feel free to do that, and then we'll use that to set up your environment when you request for a code space. Awesome. So now that we've seen all of that, I'm going to head back to this notebook here real quick. Let's get rid of this, and then go to this notebook. And really quick, this is essentially simple image classification using PyTorch, right? Essentially, we are first downloading a data set and then previewing images from that data set. Then we are configuring a neural network. This is really the crux of my notebook, right? This is where we convert a specific image to a description. Then I'm going to train my network with that data set and save a model. Then we will test that trained model. And then lastly, we are dumping some accuracy numbers into this notebook right here. Now, let's say I want to continue working on this particular notebook, right? Let's say I want to optimize my model accuracy. So first up, let's get all of these accuracy numbers into a CSV file, and then let's plot a bar chart for it so that we can take a look at how well we are doing with the accuracy currently. So I'm going to add a block of code here. Let's say import CSV. And you'll see here, hopefully folks can see how Copilot is pretty much predicting what I should do next. So I'm just going to hit the tab key and complete that. And then Copilot pretty much tells me the entire function to be able to create an accuracy.csv file and then calculate the accuracy numbers and put them into that file. So let's make sure this actually works. I'm going to run this block of code. And you'll see here that accuracy.csv file was created. Awesome, thanks Copilot. Let's go back to the notebook here. I'm going to X this out. Next up, I want to import matplotlib since we need to draw that bar chart. And then we're going to import pandas instead of NumPy here. And we're just going to see Copilot do its magic at this point. It pretty much knows what I need to do and plot a bar chart, because that's what we want to do here. And then you'll hopefully see how Copilot recommends the next lines of code to me. What happened, Copilot? Let me just do this again. Oh, there you go. 1 second. Let us try again, since I really want y'all to see this. This worked for me, guys. This is just the demo doing it. Trust me. All right. And that's it. OK, that's OK. No worries. We can just move ahead instead of trying to. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Copilot. A little late, but there it is. So yeah, I can effectively just hit tab, right, and complete those lines of code without having to worry about the syntax to go figure out how to plot that bar chart. Let's again run this block of code to make sure it looks good. And there you go. I have this bar chart created for me within a few seconds. And I can focus on optimizing the model, focusing on the business logic, think about how I productionize this notebook, from my dev environment ultimately to production. Now, talking about productionizing it, the other thing I love to highlight is that this is a fully configured IDE, which means in addition to working with your notebooks, updating cells, running them, you also have access to a terminal, a debugger, so that you can think about how you would move this notebook ultimately into production. So let's do some code refactoring here, right? Something that you would probably do in your day-to-day. Let's head back to this second step here, where we were creating the model, right? This is the crux of our notebook. So I'm going to copy paste pretty much this function here, and we are going to create a source folder in my project. Inside of that, we are going to create 2 files. We are going to create a init.py file, and then we're also going to create a configure model.py file. And then inside that, we are going to paste all of these contents. I'm going to head back here. Probably we also need some of these imports. So let's move those imports as well. Let me just expand this. Let's add that. Let's also add import torch in here. Cool. And then we can head back to this notebook, probably get rid of this line of code from here. And then the one thing that I need to do real quick is I also need to set a Python path so that we can call into our module correctly. And in the interest of time, I do have that line of code copied to my clipboard here. So let's just try to paste it. OK, there you go. And then lastly, I need to simply import the model that we created, the configure.model.py. So we're going to say, oh, thanks to Copilot, I don't need to worry about that syntax. And at this point, I can essentially restart my kernel. So we can type in Control-Shift-P here, look for the restart kernel command, and restart the kernel. And then we can hit run all and make sure everything looks good. Now, in case you do come across errors here, you can always hit breakpoints, You can hit F5 and start a debugging session in this code space. And once you're satisfied with all of the changes that you've made in that refactoring process, you can simply head to source control, type in a message, let's just say refactor model, and commit it right from this environment and be done with this task end to end. So that's the power of configuration as code, where you can, with a one click, get into this environment, focus on the task, and just be done with it end to end, and then simply discard this code space and move on to your next task, if you will. All right, so now that we've seen this, let me continue telling you my story. Now, as I continued working on my project, right, I managed to get started, get it set up. I soon started running into out of memory, not enough cores on your machine type of errors quite often. Now, I will admit the data set that we were working on was quite large. Think of tens of thousands of rows. So it used to take us hours to just pre-process it and then do feature selection and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the model that we were working with was also super complex. So I remember we used to start our model training with that large data set in the morning and pretty much wait until end of the day to get some meaningful output. And just considering the complexity of the model and the size of our data sets, my laptop was just not powerful enough to handle that kind of workload efficiently. Now with Codespaces, we no longer need you to worry about such scenarios at all. So you not only have access to this standard environment with config as code, but you can exactly tell us how much power you need to complete a given task. So you can select between a range of machine types, right from 2 core machines to 32 cores of CPU, and even a GPU SKU, which is currently in preview for all of your compute-intensive tasks, whether it is working with the largest data sets, the most complex models, doing AI inferencing, and so on and so forth. So we are actually going to see GPU Codespaces in action now. So let's head back to a trimmed version of the very popular Stable Diffusion project. I'm sure some of you are already familiar with this one. Now, one of the prerequisites for the Stable Diffusion model is that it requires a GPU SKU, primarily because it's a very complex model and the data set that it's trained with is also quite large. So I already have this code space that's powered by a GPU created for me. This first cell block here actually checks if the GPU is present. So let's hit run here, and you'll say that it in fact says GPU detected. Awesome. And then for context, Stable Diffusion is a text-to-image diffusion model where it's trained with a large data set of images. And then as users, we can supply it with a text prompt, and you'll see you can get very creative with these text prompts. And then the model will go run and find a fun image and the most relevant image for you. And I will say I haven't been disappointed so far. So let's use this opportunity to try one more text-to-image conversion. Since we've been talking about birthday cakes, you know what? Let's say a photograph of a pigeon, if I can spell pigeon, eating a birthday cake. Because y'all, are we going to see that in real life? I don't think so. So let's have a model do it for us. And you'll see that it runs super fast, looking through those images that it is loaded with, and hopefully it should show us an image here. Oh, there you go. That is a very realistic pigeon sitting on a cupcake, but I'll take it. It's fun. Awesome. All right, so now that we've seen GPU Codespaces, let me continue telling you my story. Now, I'm sure as developers, all of us have our favorite or preferred IDEs, tools that we enjoy working with, right? This is actually a picture of my team back then when we had an opportunity to tour one of the Cummins warehouses. We saw how engines were built and assembled in real time. It was an incredible experience. Now, in my team, I have personally come to love and learn VS Code. That's what I use today as well. But then I also had some team members who preferred working with Jupyter Lab. Some of them enjoyed working with PyCharm. Some of them just preferred SSH, right? Now with Codespaces, we really want to meet you where you are and provide you access to the tools, the editors that you love, that you enjoy working with. So with that, in addition to VS Code, which is the default editor for Codespaces, we're also adding support for Jupyter Lab, PyCharm, and other JetBrains IDEs. So we're again going to head back to the same Stable Diffusion model that we took a look at. And instead of VS Code, we are going to spin it up using JupyterLab. So there are a couple of ways you can go about it. The first way is using our GitHub CLI. So if you type in GHCS Jupyter and hit enter, that should give you a list of running code spaces that you have. The one that I want is Stable Diffusion. So let's go there and hit enter. And within a few seconds, we'll basically spin up JupyterLab in your browser. There you go. As that loads up, the other way to go about this is if you click on this green code button here, go to the code space, then we've added this Open In tab where you can select from a wide range of IDEs, and JupyterLab is, again, one of them, right? Now, let's head to this JupyterLab instance here. Hopefully, it shows up if the demo gods are with me. If not, then we should try this option, but let's give it a few minutes here. Or maybe we can also open it up with this and see if this works for us. All right, it says it's connecting. Yeah, connecting to forwarded port. Maybe I'll get rid of this then. And come on. Let's see here. I mean, if this does not work, we're going to try the GHCS Jupyter command one more time, because I have faith, you guys. All right, let's try again. Let's just, I'm going to close my command prompt. We're going to open it again, and I'm going to type in GHCS Jupyter. I mean, this experience is in beta, so we would love feedback. This is, let's see. Come on. See if it shows up this time. Oh, maybe not. All right, maybe we can get a video in, and I can still show it to you, because I'm excited to show JupyterLab support. Let's do that. Let's get a video. All right, so you'll see that that's the Stable Diffusion project right there. I can type in GHCS Jupyter, and that should show us a list of existing code spaces, as we saw there. I can just hit enter, and then that should open up my code space with JupyterLab within a few seconds. And I think I show a couple of other ways to also create and access the code space with JupyterLab. So let's take a look at that. So the first way is, as I showed you there, you can go to an existing code space, use the Open In option, and that should give you the Open In JupyterLab experience. The other one that I think show here as well is if you go to github.com/codespaces, you'll also see some of your code spaces show up there too. But anyway, right now, I'm going to restart the kernel and run all cells. And we're then going to go to github.com/codespaces. This is where you'll see all of the code spaces that you've created across different projects. And this is another place where you can open it up with JupyterLab. So if you'll see the Open In option there and the Open In JupyterLab command. All right, so let's head to that Stable Diffusion model. It's opened up in JupyterLab instance. It's still powered by a code space, and it's still using the same configuration that lives in my repository, if you will. So let's go ahead and try a different one, right? Let's say, I think this was a photo of a monkey scuba diving, if I'm not wrong, if I remember, if my memory helps me. And yes, there you go, that's the one. So let's run it, and hopefully we should see another fun text-to-image conversion with a GPU-backed code space in JupyterLab. Oh, there you go. That's nice. That's a very cute monkey. It's underwater. It's wearing a scuba dive gear. So that's an awesome, awesome one. All right, cool. Let us continue talking about my story now. Oh, that's another one. That's very right, that there were two models that I had in the demo. All right, can we switch to the deck? Awesome. Now, when there's a team, there is a ton of sharing and collaboration, right? Even today, when I come across an awesome notebook, I just can't wait to share it with my teammates or friends so that they can try it out as well. Now, with Codespaces, our mission is not only to get you up and running quickly, but to also enable quick sharing, collaboration with your team, or just the community as we all learn and build products together. So with that, I'm going to share a sneak peek into something super exciting that we're working on. Before we play a pre-recorded video, let's assume that one of my teammates shared this fun notebook that they came across via Slack. So let's roll the video now. So I can click on that and open up the notebook with the github.dev web editor. At this point, I can look at all of the awesome notebooks that are part of that project. In addition to that, I can have access to this rich notebook editing experience. So I can make changes to the cells, or I can just explore this notebook. Now, what we're adding support for is the ability to also run this notebook directly from the web editor by connecting it to a Codespace. So you can specify exactly how much compute you need, and then we'll create a backing Codespace, start the Jupyter server, attach a kernel for you, so that you can run the cells right in this editor without losing any context. Now, this is an IP widgets samples library, as you see it. So I can, once I hit run all, I can actually explore what a slider is and what a text box is, what a scroll bar is, and whatnot. So I can basically focus on exploring this notebook. Now, the awesome part is this entire repo is backed by a Codespace at this point, which means I can actually head to a different notebook in the same project and again hit run all to explore all of the other notebooks that are part of that project. So as I said, this experience is coming soon. We're working on it as we speak, but if folks would like early access, definitely come chat with us, and we'll share that information with you. All right. Now, since we're hearing my story, let me tell you one last one. As I was traveling to SF from Vancouver on the plane, I had some time to rehearse my talk, right? Just get all of it set up, test my demos. However, one thing that was missing, though, was that there was no Wi-Fi on the plane, which means I was not able to test my Codespaces demos with no internet connection. Now, this is where the dev containers extension was extremely helpful to get me up and running with a very Codespaces-like experience, but on my local machine instead. Now, the dev containers extension follows the same dev containers spec, which means once you have that configuration created in your repo, you can not only use it to create a fully configured Codespace in the cloud, but you can also use it to create a fully featured dev environment on your local machine. To highlight a few improvements that we are doing for that dev container spec, first up, we've opened the meta dev container spec so that it can be used across other editors and beyond development scenarios, including CI/CD, test automation, and more. The dev containers extension and the Codespace extension both follow the same dev containers CLI. And the great news is that we are also open sourcing that dev containers CLI so that any tool or anyone can contribute to it to make it work for your own needs. In addition to that, we also saw features when we looked at that CUDA feature in my previous demo. So you can not only take advantage of all of the existing features that we support you, but you can also create your own via OCI artifacts that are very much tailored to your own needs. Now, I know this is a lot of information, so if you type in containers.dev in your browser, you'll get all of this information. In addition to that, we are super excited to just get feedback on all of these things that are open source now. So if you would like to collaborate with us, please join the Dev Containers community Slack channel, and you should have all of the information right there. All right. Now, as we near the end of my talk, and since I started with a cake analogy, I would love to end with one too. As most of you might know already, Codespaces are rolling out as GA this week for all users. And as part of that, our cake to you is this free included monthly usage across free and pro plans that I highly encourage everyone to take advantage of. With that, there are some next steps that I want to end you with. There is a getting started guide that includes all of these repo links, so definitely check that out. If you would like to sign up to get GPU access in preview, that's the short link to fill out a form. And lastly, if you just want to stay up to date with everything that we are doing with Codespaces, you can subscribe to our roadmap. With that, I definitely want to thank everyone to be here and have a great rest of your day. Thanks all.